Hey, welcome back, everybody. And before I introduce my next guest, I wanted to take a minute to talk about the situation in Ukraine and in regards to the podcast, because I was thinking for a long time whether or not I should be recording, whether or not I should be publishing. But I believe in order for us to move on and in order for us to stay united and continue to support Ukraine, I wanted to use my platform in that regard and raise awareness. That's the least I can do with my platform and with the subscribership that we have on our channel, and hopefully contribute to the refugees that the war caused, and hopefully be able to help them to find a new life, or at least to bridge this gap until the war ends. I will provide some links where you can donate internationally, Lithuanians in Germany. So you'll find it in the show notes below, whether it's on audio or on the YouTube platform, and you'll be able to contribute in one way or another. There's always something we can do, and I believe that's the least that I can do. So we're moving forward. I believe that positivity is the only way out. Negativity will only carry you that far, and I think that positivity will win in the end. So let's stay positive. Let's continue to support Ukrainians in all ways possible, and continue to fight through and push through these tough times. The guest today that was recorded in mid-February, February 16th, which is Lithuania's Independence Day. So keep that in mind as you're listening. It's been a month ago. We talked to Thorsten Leibenath, who is currently the sports director at Ulm in Germany's first division and Eurocup. And he is also a former coach at Ulm. He was one of the youngest coaches to be in the BBL. And today he talked to me about his transition to being a young head coach, the challenges he dealt with, also to why he went overseas to coach in a different country early on in his career, as well as the challenges he dealt with when he came back. We talked about resolving conflicts, how to gain respect as a young coach, and many different topics that I think can interest a lot of up-and-coming coaches. So please listen in, tune in, comment, like, subscribe, and support Ukraine. Slava Ukraini. Thorsten, good morning, I should say probably.
Yes, good morning. It's still early enough to say good morning, I guess.
Yeah, in Lithuania it's noonish, so it's kind of noonish, but I don't know. I asked you if you hear anything in the background. Luckily you can't. I can, so I hope this podcast will not get disturbed. But if you had to guess what today's day means for Lithuania, could you guess February 16th?
I could guess, and I would guess something in terms of independence. But
yes,
it's definitely just a guess.
Yes, the independence it is. I'm wearing a Lithuania sweater from my national team times, and it's a big representation today. You're wearing Ulm, I'm wearing Lithuania. Do you have any Lithuanian stories, any connections, anything from your past that remind you, or you have traveled to maybe for games? Is there anything that you can really have a fond memory of?
Yes, and I always lost in Lithuanian, so I don't know if I should call the memories fond, but yeah, as impressive as Lithuania is, not only as a basketball country, but as a country itself, they made sure they impressed me also on the court. One time we played with the Artland Dragons against Lietuvos Rytas, back then with Chuck Eitzen, who I also had the privilege to coach as an assistant coach, and who single-handedly killed us. But the whole team was unbelievable back then. Rimas Kotinaitis was coaching them. And I also remember playing there against Lietkabelis with Ratiopharm Ulm, also in the Eurocup, and similar experience. I thought we were the favorites going into this game, but they did a job on us. Were really well coached, I think, by Max Vitis, and they also beat us at their place.
There is a we have some airplanes coming over Lithuania now. So yeah, the year with Rytas, I think Aaron Baines was also the center, wasn't it, or was it after? Was Aaron Baines there?
To be perfectly honest, I cannot recall. I know just there were quite a few Lithuanian players that I hadn't heard of before, and they were unbelievably in terms of shooting, in terms of shooting out of a high pace, like their transition offense. They come down the lane and they immediately fire, and their footwork was unbelievable, and it left a marker on me as a coach, because I felt shooting is one thing, shooting at a maximum pace is something else, and Lithuanian players probably they're best in it.
Yeah, the high pace, that's Kurtinaitis, is also the transition offense, the traditional flow offense in Lithuania. Every youth team also plays up until now, mostly. I mean, there's been some variations of it, but Kurtinaitis was known for that. And that team was very strong in that very good up and down team, like you said, with sharing the ball was the emphasis, obviously, and the unselfishness, especially with a guy also like Chuck Aitson, who can make the play for anybody and put you guys in pick and rolls. I mean, you can only, as a coach, you can only enjoy those kind of players having on your team, the versatility they give you.
Yeah. I remember when he came first to Europe, he started out his European career in Giessen, and we actually even had him on a tryout, and Stefan Koch, who was the head coach at the time, and I happened to be the assistant coach. We basically called off the tryout after the first practice, because it was so obvious how unbelievably good he is.
Yeah, I had an experience like that also in Germany. In the second division, we had some guys in tryouts that you think like let's see if it's gonna work or not. There's the background of the player that has maybe a year off, and we had a guy who was on tryout, and you may remember him because he played for Göttingen afterwards, and then had a long career in Poland. Rocky Trice, do you remember him?
He was on my team too.
That's right.
I coached him in Ulm for one season.
Yeah. That's right. 1 year. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. Excellent player. Unbelievable player for a guy his size. Yeah. You wouldn't believe how much rebounds he gets, how much steals he gets. Yeah. Like he was slim in a way, but he would call it wiry strong, and I agree with that. Great mid-range jump shooter, lefty, and just a pest on defense.
Yes, that was the thing that he caught us on, and to us he was like a sixth man kind of. We signed him at late of preparation, and then we're like, let's see, like let's just bring him in. It's a really, he had a year off because he played in the semi-pro league. French contract didn't work out. He was supposed to sign in France, so he had basically a year off, and then you get him in. And you see practices, and he dunks it with one dribble from half court, and he presses full court, and you just are thinking like, this guy cannot come off the bench. Like, he ends up being a starter, and I think he won the MVP that year too of the league. So I mean, and we beat John Patrick that year in the cup, and Göttingen signed him right away the following year, because it was too obvious that he was just not for Pro A at that point. But the reason, I can't believe, I forgot that you coached him. I can't believe that didn't ring a bell.
And it was a real successful season. It was the season when we made the finals, 11-12.
Yeah. So that's the reason I want to talk to you. You are the sports director at Ulm, but you also have a rich history of being a head coach and a young head coach. And the topics today mostly will revolve around coaching and head coach, but also the transition periods from assistant coach to head coach, from head coach to sports director, and being young basically in all positions, coming into the professions at a young age. But to touch a little bit on your background, I saw that you were born in Leverkusen. Did the Leverkusen Hochburg, as you call it, the basketball traditional, because it was a team that, by the way, we also beat that year with Rocky Trice when they came to play us in the cup. But did that tradition inspire you also to go into coaching and go into the basketball profession in general? Was that had a big effect on your career?
It definitely had. Like when you're a kid, you want to be a player. You don't envision yourself being a coach. So I had big dreams of becoming a Bundesliga player, national team player, whatever. And I saw all the great European players in Leverkusen because it was the best time in Leverkusen basketball. Dirk Bauermann was coaching the team, was winning 7 German championships in a row, something like that. And they were all also playing EuroLeague. So I saw Limoges, I saw Jugoplastica Split, I saw Aris Saloniki, all those teams. And back then I was a 12-year-old kid, and it left a big mark. But getting into basketball is even funnier. Because my sister, who's 12 years older, she was going to school with Detlef Schrempf.
Oh,
and
nice.
she didn't know much about basketball, but she basically told me, yeah, I remember I was in school with Detlef Schrempf, and he loved basketball. Why don't you just start playing basketball too? And this is how I got into basketball. Yeah. And in that school class, there was a second basketball player, Uwe Brauer, who also had a rich career in the German Bundesliga. And probably because of those two guys, I started to play basketball. And then I happened to be a youth player in that famous phase of Leverkusen basketball. I saw so many great players, and obviously also great coaches. And probably this is what got me into coaching later on as well.
Yeah, Leverkusen was basically, to me, what I remember, because it was 90s, I assume. It was late 90s, where they had like
early 90s,
early
late
90s,
80s,
yeah.
early 90s. I'm a little bit older than you would guess.
Yeah, but it was basically what I can compare it to. It was like the Bamberg before Bamberg happened, that long stretch of championships and domination of the German league.
Yeah, it really was like that. And at some point, Berlin came up during that stretch, but it was usually, you could tell Leverkusen's going to end up in the final, maybe Hagen, maybe Bayreuth, maybe Berlin later on. They will meet Leverkusen in the final, but they were just as dominant as Bamberg were a few years ago.
Yeah, that was the times, that was my first years in Germany, because I grew up, I started school in 1990. So, and then I was, my father was playing, obviously, and you follow basketball, but I was more on the street, either in the gym or on the street ball court, because we were in a small team. So, but Leverkusen always rang a bell in the German basketball world. But to transfer to it right into coaching, becoming a head coach at 31, if my calculations are correct, in Scotland. So how did Scotland, first of all, come about? And as if going from Germany and going straight into Scotland to coach and leading the team to the finals, and then becoming a head coach in general at 31, it's not easy. And I was wondering what the preparation was for that first role as a head coach in a foreign country, in Scotland, which is known more for soccer, probably, I would assume.
Yes, it's definitely known more for soccer. Maybe rugby over basketball too. One thing helped, and this is that I basically sucked in playing basketball. Yeah, so I found that out quite early. I played a little bit on the second division level, but I wasn't good enough. I wasn't athletic enough. So at some point, I saw that, but I had a huge passion for basketball, and I told myself I need to stay in that sport. And what other way is there than becoming a coach? So I happened to be an assistant coach on a second division team when I was 23. We moved up to the first division. So all of a sudden, I'm 24. I'm in the first division as an assistant coach. And I guess people noticed me, and a bigger club, Giessen, came up and offered me the assistant coaching role. So with 25, I was a regular assistant coach on a professional basketball team. And from that point, I really made it clear my dream, my goal is to become a head coach too. And I will sacrifice, I will prepare for this opportunity, and I need to make smart steps. And I felt one smart step is to become a head coach as soon as possible, but on a level that gives me an opportunity to make it to the Bundesliga afterwards. Mm-hmm. And back at the time, I felt if you start on a second division team in Germany, there's only one way to make it to a first division. And this is, you have to move a team up. Mm-hmm. And this is a challenging task. And if you don't move the team up, you will always be labeled as a second division coach. So for me, and I know the British basketball was below the second division in terms of the level of basketball back mm-hmm. then. But to me, it was more important I start in a first division in whatever country. Like mm-hmm. I interviewed for jobs in the Netherlands. I would have gone to any country that has somewhat a professional basketball level. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to be considered a first division coach, because as a first division coach, you get first division opportunities in other countries. As a second division coach, you for whatever reason, you will be labeled as second division coach. So I refused to take offers from the second division in Germany and rather decided to go outside of Germany into a first division. And I was lucky to work as an assistant coach with Chris Finch, who now is mm-hmm. the head coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves. Mm-hmm. And he has a rich tradition as a head coach in Great Britain. So he knew a lot of people, and he got me in contact with the Scottish Rocks back then, now Glasgow Rocks, the only Scottish team in the British League. And they felt that they wanted to have a different approach than they used to have. They wanted to have a European-oriented coach, a young coach, and Chris obviously told them about me, and they interviewed me. They liked what they heard, and this is why I moved to Scotland. And it was a very impressive experience for me.
What was the most impressive part about it? I mean, I can imagine just the culture change, going to outside the country, working. It's a lot of firsts. It's a lot of first-time head coach, first time in I assume in Scotland, maybe also first time.
Exactly.
First time dealing with a different mentality. So there's a lot of firsts involved for a rookie head coach. What were the things that you remember the most and being challenged on the most during that time?
Well, let's start it like that. The first 2 weeks, I didn't understand a word. I was thinking they speak English, and they say they do, but it has nothing to do with what I call English. So I had to adjust to the language. As funny as it sounds, now I love hearing the Scottish accent. Back then, I really struggled early on. And then you drive on the left side of the street. You have to adjust to that. All of a sudden, you're used to some sort of club infrastructure that they simply don't have. You have to pay for any practice you want to have. So I had to fight with our owner. Can we practice in the morning? Now it's too expensive. We cannot afford to rent the gym. We much rather send the players to schools in order to generate money from government funding. And I said, well, this is good, but in order to be successful on the court, we need to practice. And so I had to challenge them with my idea of professional basketball, and had to come up with compromises so we can practice, but we can also generate money. I was in charge of negotiating the contracts back then. They didn't have a sports director, or they did have a GM, but he was more responsible for sponsorships and filling the gym with spectators. So I had to do a lot of things on my own, improving their situation. And I remember also installing a basketball philosophy that they simply weren't used to. The whole team used to play, let's say, a free flow offense, read and react, like you would have it in certain colleges. And I told them, no, we will run more of a set play offense. And we lost the first 3 games. And there's the veteran coming up to me saying, Julius Joseph, by the way, great player, said, well, coach, I really like what you're doing, but why don't we just add a few of those read and react principles, and let's improvise a little bit more. I said, no, we're going to keep doing it my way. He had to suck that up, and it took some time until we became successful, but we ended up making it to the cup final. We ended up making it to the playoffs final, and it was one of the most successful seasons of the club's history.
Do you think, like, it's hard for a young? How old was Joseph at that time?
He was older than me.
So how difficult is that to stand up for your own principles and for your own belief, your own system at a young age, without having the experience of really fighting through that and navigating the waters of talking to veterans, talking to players that are older, and not even negotiating but sticking to your guns, basically? Did you feel the inner challenge, or was that to you a no-brainer, and you really did you have to even consult maybe with a mentor about what to do?
No, that was a big challenge. What definitely helps in that regard is if you have the support of the club, of the owner, of the GM, and they wanted to look different on the court. They really wanted that European approach of more set play style offense. So with that support, it was possible for me to convince the players. And also soon the progress came and the success came, and then they saw it, and then it was a no-brainer for them too. Mm-hmm. It's always a bigger challenge when you're a young person to convince people, convince people with a lot of experience. But the biggest thing is you need to be competent. You need to prove to them that you know what you're talking about. As soon as you do that, they don't care about your age. If they feel you don't have the answers and you're fishing for excuses, or you cannot give a logical response, then they might eat you alive. Yeah. And you obviously felt ready for that challenge. You obviously felt ready to anticipate also the questions that will come, because as a coach, you always have to anticipate which questions may arise when I implement this, when I do this, when I say this. Then you always have to think 2-3 steps ahead of time. And exactly, I learned that from Ettore Messina. He said, like, it doesn't matter so much what you're doing, as long as you can explain why you're doing it. Yeah, so you can run a hard hedge pick and roll defense, you can run a flat defense if you have a good explanation why you believe this is the right thing, and then you also have the personality to sell it. Yeah, then players will follow. Absolutely, that's the why. The why left the biggest impression when after being with Ettore for a lot and talking, have a lot of discussions. I had my experience as well, where you give a suggestion of what to do, and then he says why, and you don't have an answer. Guess who's going to suffer? I have to have an answer prepared. Like, he's going to listen, but he also wants an explanation. Like, why are we doing this? What's helpful? Why should that be successful over this? And trust me, not only Messina is asking those questions, players are asking those questions too. Like, there's a post-game meeting. Coach decided to run full court trap in the 32nd minute. Players going to ask, why did we do that? We exposed ourselves around the basket. If you don't have a good answer, then this upcoming week is going to be trouble. Yeah, absolutely. Talking about the owners, you said the owners gave you support. Did they have a basketball background? They actually didn't, and that was kind of surprising to me. That told me what smart brains they were. They were listening to smart people like Chris Finch, and that's why they believed, okay, this is the right way to do. They watch a lot of basketball. They didn't necessarily like the way basketball was handled in Great Britain. They wanted to do it better. They wanted to do it different, and you can definitely tell it's still 30 years behind. Unfortunately, they haven't set the standards like the German BBL did. Like, you need to play in gyms with the amount of, let's say, 3,000 spectators. All those standards that the German league developed, Great Britain struggled to develop, and that's why I believe they're behind. But the ownership I had in Glasgow was very forward thinking, and they wanted to change things. And that obviously helped me being backed up by them.
Credit to them. Credit
Yeah.
to really sticking with it and not really listening to too many opinions. So too many cooks can ruin the soup, right?
This is what I experience quite often as a coach. You need to receive certain power, and for me, when choosing a job as a head coach, it was always important that I have a say in choosing players too, because as a head coach, you will be held responsible. Mm-hmm. So if I will be held responsible for losses, I will always want to have a say, or I want to have a say in what personnel I navigate, I lead. So whenever I had the feeling, and this is working perfectly in Ulm at the time when I was the head coach, like it was two people deciding, Dr. Thomas Stoll and me. Each of us could veto a suggestion from the other, and we both had to agree on a player, and then we would sign. And that was an easy solution. But in too many clubs, I see there's 5-6 guys on a board trying to talk when players are signed, and it's a way slower process, and it's a process where all of a sudden you need to make compromises you don't really feel like doing.
Mm-hmm. And especially like you said, because you will be held accountable, and both guys understand and know basketball, it's important just to stick with that, because the more people come in with not the full idea of what you want to do as a coach, and not the full idea of what the big picture looks like, and just like vetoing on the player without knowing what his role will be or how it would look like within the team's team concept, it's really deconstructive. I mean, it's really you're shooting yourself in the foot and miss out probably on some players. So two guys, maybe three, maybe a third person that
exactly
to have this core and sticking with that is I think the most important part of building a successful roster.
And I also have to say, especially when I was younger, there's a certain amount of insecurity about your decision making. I think it's normal, or at least it was part of my personality. And the more people would try to influence me, obviously, the more opinions you hear, and the less secure you get about your own opinion. So it's just like when you consult a doctor. You consult a second doctor, and all of a sudden, 2 doctors consulted, 3 opinions you have. And in coaching and in recruiting, it's no difference. It's everybody has his own opinion. And I experienced that it does help me when I stick to my gut feeling. And the gut feeling is more dominant when I don't hear too many different opinions.
That's what Sharas was saying, something similar in the regards of gathering opinions, but also feeling some sort of, like, not, I wouldn't say insecurity, but second guessing yourself the whole time, because you just don't have the experience. And then he said, the longer you do it, the more you go through the preparation process, the more you trust the process. And he said when they were going through a losing streak, it was more of like there was no panic. They're like, I believe he said 9 games in a row at some point with Žalgiris. And there was no panic because they knew that they were building towards something, and the process was there, and the implementation of the philosophy, they were working. And you just kind of, like you said, you trust your gut, but you also trust the experience that you already put in.
Yeah, and at the same time, I think it's still important to consult a lot of people. Yeah, but consulting people is different than giving them the power to also decide with you. Yeah, absolutely. So me as a head coach, whenever there was a basketball topic, I felt I shouldn't be the only one judging on it, because I never played on the Eurocup level. I never even played on the BBL level. Why not speak to my players? Why not hear their opinion? And then quite often I felt a little different about a certain topic, what kind of pick and roll coverage we should use against Bamberg. But if the majority of my team feels we should play it more conservative, let's stick with it. So in that regard, I was pretty flexible as a coach. But also, I still believe making decisions based on your gut feeling is important, because now you can really sell this, because you're really convinced of it. If you try to sell a decision you're not convinced of, players will feel that, and then they're not convinced of doing it neither.
Quick scientific explanation for that from Dr. Benas. So the most neurons you have are in your brain, and the second most neurons that are floating around, guess where they are?
Probably in your stomach.
In your stomach, in your gut. And then the third, I think, is in your heart. But that's just a little tidbit here from Dr. Benas, from listening to all kinds of podcasts all day long. You asking players for consulting players for opinion, it's a big thing. And I think that shows you're making yourself vulnerable as a coach, but you also show that you trust them. And then I feel like that you show them the trust, you give them the opportunity to say something, to consult in front of everybody on the floor, and kind of navigating through the different options that we can go through and why we're doing it, giving them the opportunity to be involved in the process, I think gives them also a sense of holding themselves accountable. I think
it's super important. Like we pay them really a lot of money, and why should they only be consumers of orders? Like I want them to be an active part in the decision making, like in the solution finding. They're too expensive to just receive orders and follow them. So why not use their knowledge? Why not use their creativity in order to find solutions? And then, as you said, the second aspect behind it is they will be way more convinced executing those solutions they found together.
Did that ever backfire on you? Any moment where you felt like, oh, I shouldn't have asked it this time? Maybe like it was maybe at the right time or that right person. Maybe that one person is really negative and really looks for something to poke on. Exactly.
Like some players, they demand that leadership where the coach decides everything, and there's no second guessing, there's no questioning his authority. And to me, it was always like, it's no lack of authority or lack of competence if I let them have a say in solution finding. One thing needs to be clear though, and I felt most of my players understood that. The timing is crucial. You cannot start a discussion round in a timeout. During a game, absolutely, the coach decides this is how we do it. This is how we roll. Maybe at halftime, in that break, you could still hear their opinions, but in a timeout, there's just not enough time to hear everybody out. So during a game, it's pretty obvious the coach makes the decisions and we roll with it. Before and after, let's come up with solutions collectively.
So it's mostly timing and also roster dependent, I would say. Like right, like the roster you have to kind of you kind of, again, you trust your gut a little bit. You see how they are, who they are as a person, how they react, and how they really absorb information. Sometimes it's better. It's maybe more useful, more productive to consult. And sometimes it's better just to be a dictator for a day or two.
And I remember with new teams early on, I let them sort out our team goals. And for some of the players, this was totally unusual. They felt, why is the coach not telling us what our goals are this season? But I felt if the team agrees on a collective goal for the season, then I can really hold them accountable. If I just put that on them, let's finish top 4, and they feel now we're not that good. Where's the motivation to really work for this goal?
That's a very good point too. Make them But how early do you do that? Like right away, because they don't even know.
No, right away is too early, and actually I wouldn't have an opinion in the first week of camp. I don't know how good we can possibly be. But at some point, let's say like after 5-6 weeks, 1 or 2 weeks into before the season starts, this is when I would sit my teams together, and this is where we would have a open discussion about season goals, about qualitative goals, about quantitative goals, and we broke it down. Yeah, we wanted to develop standards that will lead into certain goals. Yeah, and those, let's say, numbers goals, less than 14 turnovers per game, something like that, or out rebound our opponent in every game. Yeah, those numbers goals would lead into our season goals.
So I wanted to go back on your career a little bit, on the path, because when I remember when I was finally more conscious and I came back from the States, and I was more conscious of the BBL, and I was more involved in the process in following the Pro A and the BBL. I remember you mostly from Artland. That's the first time. That's when I had the first kind of on TV. Obviously, we didn't meet until later on. But and that was a time where I was like, man, a young head coach is able to be in the BBL and to implement his style and be successful. And I mean, Artland is a very basketball community, very small town, Quakenbrück, but it's all about basketball. And some similar, like the north at that time, it was like the north of Bamberg, northern version of Bamberg. It was always full, always packed. And I remember you in some regards. Now it's because I work for the Celtics. It's kind of like you were the first, the German version of Brad Stevens. Like, you know how old he was when he became head coach?
No, well, maybe 34, 30.
30,
okay.
Yeah, and he turned 31 that year in October. So it is it, and then you went to the front office. You're in the front office. I mean, there's a lot of parallels that you can see. That you said, like, you're younger than you're young. I mean, you're still young. So it's, in many regards, that's what I remember, you always being young. But how did that calmness come from? Because I remember you being calm and collected also, and during games, and there was sometimes also, obviously, you had emotions, obviously, and probably at Quakenbrück home games, automatically it forces you to be emotional. But I always saw you during games observing the game with a very strict and straight idea of what it should be. Where did that come from? How did that come about?
If I look back at my time at Artland, I have to say it wasn't as successful as we planned out. Twice we missed the playoffs, also by losing the head-to-head. So it was a pretty close run, but this team had a top 5 budget, I would say, and not finishing top 8 is a failure. So on the international level, we played decent basketball. We were pretty successful. I put the teams together more in regards of competing on the international level than really looking what's needed on the BBL level. And one thing that I described before, going with your gut feeling, I didn't do that enough in Artland. Back then, I would say I was still insecure as a coach, trying to find my approach to the game, try to find my identity as a coach. And I would listen to too many opinions. I would take too much advice. And one advice I remember was, like, this is a club that should dominate with its basketball concept. Whereas before, when I was successful in Glasgow, I was always trying to adjust to my opponent. Now, you look at Alba Berlin when Pesic was coaching them. They were dominant with their approach. Like, their basketball mindset was, we're playing more physical on defense than anybody else. And with that approach, we will win games. It might not be beautiful, but nobody can stand that for 40 minutes. And this is how they won a couple of championships. And being a somewhat big club or a bigger club, top 5 budget back then, I was listening to the advice, let's try to be like that too. So I followed that advice, although my gut feeling would say, no, let's still be adjusting to our opponents. Sometimes, yes, you can play a defense where you try to just be way more physical and way more aggressive. But there's some situations where it's smarter to stay away from a non-shooter rather than pressuring him to an extent where he just can break you down with a quick, explosive first step. So back then I was still insecure and probably not calm enough and not confident in my decision-making enough. And that's why I felt I wasn't as successful as I wanted to be and the club wanted me to be. And I went back to going with what I really believe in terms of basketball, being flexible, adjusting to the roster, adjusting to the opponent's roster, always preparing 100%, not just saying, this is our philosophy, we will do it no matter who we're going to play. And then coming to Ulm, I stuck with that. And this is when I went back on the path of success, I would say.
So that's one thing I also wanted to touch on in Ulm, that successful part, especially the 27-game winning streak. I remember that also. It was a long stretch of games winning, and I was wondering, the biggest, like, there's teams that go through losing stretches and there's winning stretches, and there's two different styles of, like,
I've seen both, trust me.
I'm sure, but 27 games of winning is a long streak. Tell me what were the challenges that you feel, did you remember your team had or you had with the team to keep them motivated and to keep them engaged after 16 wins, 17 wins? I mean, it's still like you feel like the team internally feels like they're unbeatable probably. Then there comes some sort of hubris can sneak in. You can be too confident, you can be cocky. How do you keep them humbled? How do you keep them with the eyes on the prize, basically, and keep winning? Because obviously at some point it will end, but you want it to end it the right way. If it ends, you don't want it to end because you made the mistake because the other team was just better. But how did you keep them motivated and engaged and not getting sidetracked with themselves?
This really was a unique team, and I never had the feeling like hubris would show up. Yeah, like I never felt they will become cocky now. They enjoyed that ride. They really, once they felt, man, we won 5 in a row, let's go for 10. And they got so excited, and they remained humble. One thing that definitely helped was that we also competed in the Eurocup during that time. And there we couldn't win all the games. Yeah, we had some tough losses. Yeah, so there was a reality check while we had the BBL winning record or winning run. The reality check came during the week. Yeah, so we lost some games there, and the players saw, well, we're not unbeatable. We are unbeatable, but we're also pretty good. And back when the weekend came and we played national competition, the team kept rolling, and we had some average performances during that streak too. But one thing I could always rely on, that the team showed great character in the last quarter. And we had the tactical flexibility by changing the rhythm of the game due to our personnel. Like we would run conservative pick and roll coverages on defense for 30 minutes. We would be down 10 points, and then we would switch it up to switching defense. Now, when you have Augustin Rubit, Raymar Morgan, Deshaun Butler at the big spots, they can switch out to point guards. Then you have Chris Babb, Taylor Braun, Carsten Tata, Braden Hobbs at the guard spots. They can front a big. All of a sudden, we would change the momentum of the game by switching our pick and roll coverages, and we would come up with wins. There were some lucky ones, but what I embraced was that the team always had the confidence in themselves, but also in my decisions as the coach. Okay, coach will make the right adjustment at some point, and we're still going to win it.
So do you remember during that time having any kind of conflicts with anybody, or everything was just sunshine and rainbows the whole time?
No, you have conflicts every day. Like people think in a stretch like that, everything's easy. In a stretch like that, there's one player who just played 8 minutes and is pissed. You have to manage conflicts in winning stretches. You have to manage conflicts in losing stretches. That's just part of the game. That's why I believe a head coach nowadays needs to have extraordinary people skills. You don't need to be the best tactician, but you need to be able to manage personnel. You need to be able to manage egos. Like there's big egos in basketball, and for a good reason. They do exceptional performances. But what happens if a guy goes 0 for 8 at the 3-point line? You need to get him back on board. You need to build his confidence, or you need to bring somebody down to earth. Like when he had an exceptional performance and he thinks he's the greatest. So no matter winning or losing stretch, you need to manage personnel.
Do you remember specific moments where you had to, like, you were even challenged on a certain regard, where you had to talk in a certain way, or how did you handle conflict mostly? Did you talk to them one-on-one? Did you do it also in front of the team? What was did you have a certain approach for handling conflict, or is it from person to person different?
It always depends. It depends from person to person. It depends from conflict to conflict. Some of the conflicts you would address in front of the team in order to send a message. Sometimes it's better to do it individually. Sometimes with the same player, you feel, okay, I did it individually. The success was average. Let's go to the next level of problem solving. Yes, it's tougher when you address issues in front of the whole group, but sometimes it's necessary. And I wasn't afraid of doing it, but I also wasn't that type of coach who would always do it like that, because players are sensitive too. And if you can avoid bigger issues, why wouldn't you?
Absolutely. Yeah, you find different personalities throughout the course of careers, of seasons. Sometimes the personalities come out in certain situations only. And that's also part of the experience that you as a coach, or whichever position you have, that especially as a coach, because you're so close to them, you start gathering new information for you to process, and you have to have some sort of emotional intelligence as a coach as well. You have to be able to absorb, reflect, and understand where this emotion is coming from, what's it intertwined with, where is he coming from. So there's a lot of nuances involved in those kind of conflict solving, I think.
That's why I like the soccer approach in Great Britain or in England. They would call the head coach not head coach. They call him manager. He manages things. He manages the team, the setup of the team. He manages the tactics. He manages the personnel. And as a modern head coach in basketball, you're a manager. You're a people's manager. You need to have people skills. Yes, you need to know about X's and O's, but you also need to know how to include your athletic coach. You need to know how to include your youth program. There's so much more than just telling somebody run from A to B and make that shot. I like the English soccer version of head coach, which is called manager.
I agree. So transitioning to the sports director position, and then looking back to the head coaching position, looking at it from a different angle, different perspective, is there something that jumps out at you that you feel like you would do something different going forward or going backwards, when you feel like at the time where certain situations arise, looking as a sports director, that you had as a coach, and that you see maybe Jaka handling it in a certain way, and there's certain things that you can take away from?
Well, now as a sports director, but also when I was a head coach, I would look at a player and something would have to catch my eye. He needed to have a unique, you call it USP, unique selling point. What's the specialty about a player? And I also feel as a head coach, you need to be unique in some way. Is it how to, like I give you an example. John Patrick is unique because he emphasizes the offensive rebound so much, the pressure on defense. Ingo Freier is unique. Like there's certain coaches who are simply unique in their approach. And you don't need to agree with their approach, but you need to have something that differentiates yourself from the other coaches. And looking at me as a younger coach, I was probably just a coach, but I didn't have that clear identity as a coach. Like I always struggle with the word philosophy because it's such a big word, but you have to have a clear idea, and this idea should be different to the other 17 ideas out there.
That's a very good point. Also a good selling point to other coaches.
Exactly. Like when I have to hire the next coach, well, I will look at people that stand out, that are unique in a certain way. Like I don't care how many titles they won. There's so many coaches who won titles, but I will look for something that catches my eye, that I find, okay, with that approach, he can do something big because it's different to all the other approaches. I was probably pretty cocky myself as a coach. I would never run all the plays that were just common. Like you see trends in basketball, and right now it's the side pick and roll into top pick and roll. Like when I see a trend like that, I would not implement it in my playbook because I was too cocky. I said, okay, that's just copying. Let's try something different. And so I would probably look for a coach who initiated a new trend, or who went back to things that worked 10 years ago, and all of a sudden he's successful with that. You don't need to be an inventor every time, but I want to see this coach stands for this idea.
I totally agree, and I'm thinking to myself as well, because I'm too stubborn. Not like I'm too stubborn to do the same thing as somebody else is doing, because I always want to put my own, and I'm not only talking about X's and O's, but I always want to put my own kind of sauce on it. So maybe run a side pick and roll, and then instead of a top pick and roll, you come and change the angle on pick and roll, or like just having something different. It's I don't know if it's the ego, but it's something that the extra creativity modus kicks in, and it's like you said, I don't want to do the same thing. I just needs to be something different all the time.
And now, if I look at myself, so what was my unique selling point? Definitely not having a clear identity, or if the clear identity, then it was being able to adjust every year new. Like never relying on something that worked last year, I'll do the same again. Like if you take a look at my playbooks, 11-12 with John Bryant, we played totally different than 15-16 with Raymond Morgan at the 5. So I always try to be as flexible as possible, being able to adjust as good as possible, and maybe that was my unique selling point.
Yes, that's when stubbornness would actually hurt you. Like you need to be stubborn.
Exactly.
You need to be stubborn on being flexible. That's so define the sports director position for me, as when you came in and the adjustment you did. But how would you define the position of learning it?
Well, nobody really has taught me. I never had a sports director that I could learn from. So I did most of the things I did as a coach now, with basically focusing more on the bigger picture. You're caught up in the daily business as a head coach. You need to win games. You need to win the next game. And now as a sports director, the next game is not so important. It's more important, does the team develop into the right direction? Do I see a clear path of this team, or is it just going from side to side? And I see a clear path. I want to try to help develop that clear path by making the right decisions. So the perspective changes when you're a sports director to when you're a head coach. But my work hasn't changed that much. Obviously, I have more time recruiting. I can be more precise. I don't just recruit in the off season, whereas when I was a head coach, recruiting was mainly part of the off season. Now it's a 12-month project, or even longer.
So also, I mean, the recruiting, the scouting, the watching, but how did the coaching prepare you for this in terms of organization? Because like coaches have to be organized, coaches have to be disciplined in regards of structure, just preparing the practices, preparing the whole process. But how do you, or what tools rather, that helped you as a coach or and values help you today in your job as a sports director?
What helped me, and I think also what led me to my position now as a sports director, was that I integrated myself into the whole organization as a head coach. I remember they were really surprised when I said I would like to have an office in our Geschäftsstelle. I don't know what you call it, front office, back office, but I want to have my desk in there. A lot of coaches operate from home when they prepare practice, and then they just show up in the gym and run the practice. They show up on game day, but there's no real connection to the front office. So I felt this is the heart of the club. I need to be in the heart of the club. I need to feel the pulse. I need to be approachable. I need to hear the concerns, the problems, the challenges, all the different areas have, like issues in the accounting, issues in the organization of home games, whatever. I need to hear about them. I need to be available for them, because they do everything they can in order to build a great product. And if a head coach can be supportive there, everybody will really appreciate that. Mm-hmm. If you isolate yourself, well, I'm the head coach, leave me alone with all your issues. I don't want to deal with this. I'm just X's and O, and team is everything. I think that makes it hard. You need to have an open mind. You need to be approachable for all kinds of issues that evolve around a basketball club. And I did that when I was a head coach already. And I think that prepared me for being a sports director now.
You basically have to live the club. It's where everything happens. Like you said, it's the heart and soul of the whole organization. And you want to feel the pulse. And you won't believe how the employees in the front office, how much they identify with this team. Mm-hmm. And it's disrespectful to them if you don't give them the opportunity to approach you, to reach out to you, to communicate with you. So I never wanted to be disrespectful. I felt their level of identification, I owe them that they can always reach out to me. And passively, without the intent, they also kind of held you accountable because you felt how much they cared, and then you felt the responsibility also to give extra effort and make it all work in the big picture.
And in a way, they saw how much I care, because they saw me putting in hours in the office too, not just running 2 practices a day and that's it. Like they were able to ask me, hey, can you come with me to a sponsor, explain them our losing streak, and I did stuff like that. More than once.
It's perfect segue for culture, because that's also part of implementing a culture as a coach. Like you're involved in the culture, but you also identify with, you're building something together. Is it easier for you, or was it easier for you as a coach to implement that culture and the mentality that when you move to the front office and when you have the team, the players around you all the time, that you can implement a culture? Or is part different, but as a sports director in the front office, you also want to implement some sort of culture and identity into the club, into the players? From which position do you prefer? What's the biggest difference in those two culture implementation processes?
Well, that's a great question. You need to define where I can implement. Right now, I have the chance to implement culture more with the front office employees. As a head coach, you can implement a culture better with the pro players. So I would say I'm not doing less, but the target group is different.
Where do they intertwine?
Well, this is the challenge that I'm facing. I need to make sure that there are opportunities. And now in Corona times, it's nearly impossible. We separate because we have to, and there weren't enough opportunities to bring both groups together. Mm-hmm. And this is a big challenge that we're facing in Corona times.
That's also a big challenge also to implement the fans into the process, because I know in Germany, the fans feel very identified, especially in smaller cities, with the team, and they want to feel the team, they want to know, they want to communicate and interact with the players. And I think that's what also hurts these times hurt the whole process of the club and the fans and the relationships between each other, because you can't really interact as much.
Yeah, and with us, it's crazy this year. We have a 9-2 record on the road. We have a negative record at home, and the record is even more negative when you consider the games that we had an audience. Like when we played behind closed doors, we won a couple of games. Now yesterday we had our fans back. We lost badly, and it's weird. And we desperately need our fans, and we are so grateful that they support us and that they come whenever they get the opportunity. And we haven't been able to give back, and it's a tragedy. We really feel terrible about it, and we hope we change that real soon. And we hope to really interact with them again. You cannot really interact when you have a mask on. You cannot really interact when you cannot give a high five. So it's always through a distance, and it's a shame, but these are the times we have to accept, I guess.
It's such a weird dynamic, and this time it changed. It didn't change only the clubs; it changed society. And without getting into the politics of it, without getting into all the weeds of this whole situation, we're all affected by it, and in one way or the other, clubs, society, the world. I mean, there's no brainer that every little aspect of life changed. So we all also have to change in some ways our approach to it. So. One thing also that I felt like is interesting to talk to you about is prospects, and not necessarily about certain prospects, but the environment for a prospect. I recently talked to Freddie Klemichen. I think you were actually very close to his in the same region as an assistant coach in Lich, as he was in Frankfurt.
I remember him well. Yeah.
So Freddie we talked about the environment and the process of how a prospect can flourish, and what do you think is absolutely necessary for a prospect to have? What environment you're trying to create? You have the Orange Campus, which is also probably a very big recruiting tool, but in regards of making the prospects feel at home and make them feel comfortable, what do you think is most important to have them grow and be a successful professional on whatever level in the future?
Responsibility. Like, to me, it's the biggest thing.
Teach them responsibility, or teach them responsibility?
Give them responsibility.
Okay.
Give them responsibility. Now, if you have a 17 or 18-year-old prospect, 8 out of 10 teams in the Bundesliga will have them join in practice, but they're always the first subs. Yeah, or they're sitting on the side. If the veteran player needs a break, now they step in. So the net practice time of a prospect usually is less than the net practice time of a veteran. I always flip that around. I felt the veteran, he knows basketball. He doesn't need as much practice as the young player. So I need to put the young player into a responsible environment where he gets repetitions, and he needs to do things that the veteran needs to do on the weekend. So it was unusual for guys like Chris Babb. We're putting the 5-on-5 teams together for a little scrimmage in practice, and he was out first. Per Günther was out first, and they struggled to understand early on. But to me, it was important that David Krämer would get at least the same amount of repetitions in ball screens as Carsten Tada would get. So I think this is really important. When they feel I am put in a situation where I can really learn, I can make mistakes, and I'm not just I'm a robot in the corner waiting to see the ball every fourth time. I think then they can flourish. And this is one thing I need to watch here in this organization. When I see Anton Gavel doing his job in Pro B, when I see Jaka integrating the young players, Like, I need to make sure they are put in a position where they can have responsibility for a good practice and later on for a good game.
That's a very interesting and very challenging approach. I can imagine, especially like you said,
Yes.
like for first-time veterans that to experience that is a very different
and also frustrating at some point. Yeah, like they say, "Give me the fucking ball." Yeah, like I'll run the pick and roll right here. Yes, but I still want this guy to learn it. How else should he learn? Why put him on my team if I don't put him in this position? Yeah, then it's a waste of time.
Yeah, but basically they never practice and never play. So basically you're standing still, and there's that lack of development on either end. So what you're saying is to give more theoretical practices, maybe also more video with veterans, whereas for prospects or for younger guys, they need more reps, to give more practice time, on floor time, as well as video time.
Yeah, like it's all about the economics of practices. Yeah, like if you, in a perfect world, the veteran gets a lot of repetitions and the young player gets a lot of repetitions, then the practice runs 3-4 hours. You cannot do that. So you need to be smart about it, and you need to find a good balance. Yes, sometimes the veteran also needs repetitions. That's why I would shift away from skill work, player development a little bit during my team practices, and rather do a lot of repetitions in 3-on-3, in 4-on-4, like digest the essence of a certain set play and repeat that over and over, but put those young players into the decision-making process as well. But it's a delicate issue. It's not easy to handle. Also, the veteran players, they want to practice. They get tired when they see the young players make mistakes. And also you need to have room for skill work. So we exclude that from a team practice, do it separately, and there, for example, a veteran doesn't have to do as much as a young player.
Do you prepare when you recruit rather? Do you prepare the veterans for the situation that will come, and in terms of the process, the practice process, the philosophy that's implemented, and that or do you just let it happen as it comes and you're just prepared for the reactions?
No, I think it's important that the player knows the situation he's getting into, and he knows the overall approach of the head coach. So I remember clubs would spend a ton of money on players, and there hasn't been one phone call between the player and the coach. To me, that's amazing. Like, first of all, from the perspective of the player, I want to know who I work for. Maybe I cannot relate to him, but also for a club that invests a ton of money, why not have a personal conversation between the two people that have to work so closely together that conflict's gonna arise? So I always try to give a good picture of what the player puts himself into, and also get a good feel for the player I will have to work with. And people who heard a few of my keynotes, they know I call it the beer rule. To me, it was always important. After a talk with a player, I get the impression, if I had to spend a night in a bar, in a restaurant with him, having a few beers, I would feel entertained, and I wouldn't leave the bar saying, well, that was a waste of time. If I have this kind of feel with a player, then I know I can work with him, because I can find solutions when issues arise. Like I can relate to him on a personal level, and it's not just going to be a daily hassle. Well, I have to see this face again. So I actually never went out with players and had beers with them, but I still like my beer rule still is very valuable. I need to relate to a player on a personal level. Otherwise, I don't think it will be a constructive work environment.
Don't get me started on communication. Everybody who knows me knows that this is A und O.
Exactly, the A and O.
The A and O, absolutely. It's a never-ending flow. It's supposed to be open, and you sometimes have to have these talks also to take the mask off. Like we need to take these. We don't. I generally try not to carry a mask, and I never, just being transparent, but also having the feel that you're talking to a human, I think is important from both perspectives. I mean, there's obviously always one party that may or may take advantage of that, and you have to be ready for that. You have to you make yourself vulnerable for that. But I think the payoff is much bigger if you do so. So I'm generally just an open door policy, and then at some point, like Joe Rogan said, you started with 100 points, and then I'm seeing how many, where are we going from there.
Yeah.
So you have a coach's mindset. It's obvious, and it's obvious it helped you also in your current job. But are you ready for my ATOs still? Even though you're not on the court right now, I'm going to draw up some ATOs for you.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. All right. So just quick trigger questions, quick hitter, and you're shot fire here. Biggest advice from your older self to your younger self as a coach?
Listen to your gut feeling.
If you had to do
special.
Yeah. If you had to do it over again, would you change something?
I would probably practice harder as a player and practice smarter also, and see if I can maybe make it to the first division. Like I'm still that ambitious in basketball, and I have such admiration for this sport. I would try a little bit smarter to see where this leads me, because now I know how you have to practice as a young player. I know how much video you should watch. Okay, back then it was difficult to watch video, but I would simply practice different and make a couple decisions differently. I had the opportunity to go to the States to high school. I probably would have chosen that, but I would first of all try to get my playing career on board. And as a coach, I'm actually fine with the decisions I made, with the approach I had.
Biggest sliding door moment in your career where things could have turned out differently than they have?
Well, I was close to closing the chapter, being a basketball coach, after Artland, the lack of success with the Artland Dragons. I gave myself 1 year to see if I have a market in this basketball world. After 7 months, I received an offer from a second division team in Osnabrueck, which turned out to be a disaster because the management didn't do a good job at all, and people were lied to. So it ended up in insolvency. So here it's 10 months later, and I feel like, okay, now you give yourself 2 more months and maybe basketball coaching is over, because I always felt I was realistic. If there's no market within 12 months, there will not be a market after 24 months. And economically, I couldn't wait much longer. And all of a sudden, Dr. Thomas Stoll reached out to me, and this was a huge surprise to me, because Ulm at that time was already a good club. And I felt probably I need to establish myself in the second division again before first division offers come, or internationally outside of Germany, something. But all of a sudden he offered me the job after I think 8 years before. I turned down an offer already from Ulm. So I will never forget him having this like this openness, like offering somebody a job twice after being turned down. Like this shows a lot of character. And 8 years later, 8 years later, says, well, I can still see you being our coach. Do you want to have it? And yes, I was desperate to take that opportunity, and I think it turned out well for all of us.
extra option on this ATO? I'm drawing up an extra shot option because there is a certain more place. Where would have it taken you if not basketball after Osnabrueck?
I would have
rather after Quakenbrück, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it was after Osnabrueck. Probably I would have done an ordinary job in any business. Like I cannot say exactly what it would have been. I learned Industriekaufmann at a very good organization, very good company. Maybe I would have gone that way again. Maybe I would have done something totally different. But I have no real idea. I was hoping I can remain in the area that I am most passionate about, and that is basketball.
One single most important skill as a coach.
I feel you need to be able to communicate with players. And this is pretty obvious. So what do I mean with that? I feel you need to understand their needs, their concerns. You need to put yourself into their shoes. And when you communicate with them, you also need to be flexible to some extent, but also you need to hold on to your principles as well. Yeah, so it's that fine line in communication. Yeah, being flexible on the one hand, having your integrity all the time on the other end. So you cannot bend too much, but you also need to be able to bend. And this quality is shown in all kinds of communication with players.
And the single most important skill as a sports director?
You need to identify talent for great value. So identifying talent is easy, yeah. But now you need to be able to get that kind of talent for a price that's cheaper than what you would expect you would have to pay for a player.
Mm-hmm. And I want to finish off with a leadership quote, and I want you to comment. This is from Twitter. I just found it randomly. Chantel, 100% she's not listening to this, 100%. But Chantel gave some good leadership advice that she's seen lately. So it's not her, she's quoting somebody. So maybe you can comment on that. Getting angry at people for making mistakes doesn't teach them not to make mistakes. It teaches them to start hiding their mistakes.
Yeah, it's excellent. Again, when I speak to people about my leadership approach, I tell them one of the most important things I do in order to evaluate myself is I look at how many positive feedback and how many negative feedback I gave. And if there was a practice where my negative feedback was more than 50%, I would immediately have to adjust. If there was a video session where I showed more negative clips than positive clips, I would immediately have to adjust, because I believe in the power of positivity. I believe in the power of encouragement. And this quote is really good. I can totally relate to it. Players shut down when you're just getting angry at them. And they want constructive criticism, but they are much more motivated to change the things the coach wants to be changed when you do that with a positive approach. You can motivate by fear. A lot of coaches do that, but I always believed in motivation through optimism, through positivity, through encouragement. And I would totally sign that quote.
And I want to add on to that, because it's also not only with the players, but also as a head coach with the staff, with your staff, because you also don't want to be treating your staff the whole time negatively and yelling at them and for making mistakes, because they start hiding their mistakes. They start getting insecure. It starts to create some sort of insecure environment around you, which is more important as well for you as a head coach, to have a secure environment and to have guys who you can trust, but they also can trust you that you will not take advantage of their mistakes, because everybody makes mistakes. It's just a matter of how often you make the same mistake. So like not putting certain clips in the video or forgetting certain things that the other team does that you saw that they maybe looked over. So those little things have to communicate it within the staff as well, I believe. So, and not only with the players, but with the staff, I think the leadership is just as important.
In 12 years of me being a head coach, I think not once have yelled at one of my assistant coaches and called them out in the practice. And I've seen that with coaches for sure, but I always, you treat them, there's a high chance way they will treat you. Yeah. So if I disrespect an assistant coach, I shouldn't be surprised if he disrespects me at some point. If I disrespect a player, and yes, I yelled at player too. I was loud, but I always try to maintain a certain level. I never swear at them. I never names. You need to see we're playing in front of 6,000 fans. I'm calling out a player. He's insulted. How can I expect him to be respectful towards me? I don't see that then. So I need to be respectful. Need to communication, and then I can be sure he will live up to that as well. For example, it was always super important to me, he would high five when I step out. And this is a nice little tool a player has when he wants to show the coach, well, I'm getting subbed out. He will refuse to give the high five. The player would do that once, he wouldn't do that a second time. Yeah? Like this was a red line, he wouldn't be able to cross again. Yeah? They would learn their lesson. Okay, once you disrespected me in front of 6,000, you will never disrespect me again, or will have serious.
Thorsten, I can sign off on that, and we're signing off. I appreciate your time. Thanks for joining this podcast, and it was really fun. It was really in depth and really constructive conversation we had. Thanks for that.
I love your podcast, Benas, and I feel honored that I was part of it today.
Thanks again, and hopefully we'll see you soon. And thanks for listening, everybody.